What would you do if the one thing meant to protect you became the very thing that tried to destroy you? This was the question that slammed through Clara's mind as she ran barefoot across the burning New Mexico desert, chased by the past she thought she had escaped forever. Clara's white cotton dress clung to her like a second skin, soaked with sweat, dust, and blood. The lace that once symbolized purity and obedience was now torn, muddy, and strangling her with every desperate breath. She had fled the town of penance, the church steeple, and the man who claimed he owned her soul. Her bare feet found every thorn and cactus spine the desert had, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Behind her, faint but growing louder, came the voices of two men, Josiah and Thomas, loyal followers of her husband, Preacher Hale. They were on horseback. She had nothing but her legs and her terror. "Harlot!" The wind carried the word toward her. It was his favorite name for her, his favorite wound. 2 nights ago she had dropped a plate. Milk and beans had spilled across the wooden floor. She'd whispered an apology before the sound even settled, but Preacher Hale had stood perfectly still, his frame tall and gaunt, his eyes black in the lamplight. "There are no accidents in a righteous house," he said before dragging her to the prayer closet, a narrow, airless space where she spent the night on her knees, shivering and begging for mercy she knew would never come. Now she ran from him, ran from his fists, his scripture, his cruelty, ran from the man who vowed he would burn the sin out of her until only obedience remained. Her breath rasped, a raw burn in her chest. She stumbled down a rocky wash, scraping her palms and knees. Dirt clung to the too white dress, too bright, too visible. She grabbed fistfuls of sand and scrubbed it against her body, trying to smear the brightness away. She looked up and froze. On the ridge above her, a lone rider sat on horseback. Broad shoulders, hat pulled low, still as stone. Hunting? Watching? Her heart slammed painfully. She threw herself into the shallow ravine until her skin split open with scrapes. The world spun. She pushed herself up again and kept running. Then it hit her, a sharp, hot pain on her ankle. She cried out and crashed to the ground. A rattlesnake, now sliding away, had sunk its fangs into her just above the bone. The venom was already spreading, her vision blurred, colors bending and twisting. She knew what came next: fever, blackened skin, slow, choking death. She lay back on the hot earth and closed her eyes. Maybe dying here was better than being dragged back. Her breath slowed. Her heartbeat softened. The desert began to fade. Jack Carver had no intention of saving anyone that day. He was tracking deer, annoyed at the heat and low on coffee, when he saw a flash of white tangled in the ravine below. White didn't belong out here. He lowered his rifle and studied the still form. Trouble, he thought. He should leave her. He'd learned long ago what involvement cost. The scar across his jaw, a twisted, angry mark, was proof of that. But as he watched, the desert wind gusted, shifting her tangled hair across a sunburned cheek. She wasn't moving, and Jack, for all his rough edges, couldn't leave a dying woman for the coyotes. "Hell," he muttered. He climbed down, his steps sharp and sure, and knelt beside her. Her dress was torn to shreds. Her feet were raw with cuts, her face streaked with dirt and tears. And her ankle, already swollen, already darkening, told him what happened. Snakebite. She weighed almost nothing when he lifted her, slinging her over his shoulder. She moaned, a small sound that lodged itself under his ribs. He carried her the 2 miles back to his hidden stone cabin, a place tucked so deep into the canyon walls that only a hunter or a ghost would ever find it. He laid her on his cot. She didn't wake. He grabbed whiskey and his knife. "Sorry, sister," he grunted, and sliced a cross over the bite. Her scream tore through the cabin like a broken prayer. He forced out the darkened blood, poured whiskey into the wound, held her down as she bucked from the agony. When it was done, her body slumped back, trembling and burning with fever. He soaked a rag in cool water from his cistern and wiped her face, her throat, her arms. But the dress, thick, soaked, glued to her, was trapping the heat, suffocating her. He tried to unbutton it. The buttons were tiny. Pearl. Useless. He cursed under his breath. He pulled his knife. With one hard rip, he sliced the dress open from hem to collar. The cabin filled with the sound of tearing cotton. The shreds fell away and revealed bruises, scars, lines across her back like someone had carved obedience into her skin. Jack froze, muscles locking. He knew those marks. They were the marks of men who believed pain was a holy language. She wasn't a criminal. She was a runaway. He finished cleaning her, gentler now, and dressed her in an old long John shirt of his. It hung off her, swallowing her small frame. He sat beside the cot, jaw tight, watching the fever rage through her. She didn't open her eyes. Not that night. Not the next morning. And Jack Carver, scarred, solitary, unwanted by the world, sat in a silent cabin, staring at a stranger he'd been a fool to save. But he didn't walk away. He couldn't. Something about her, maybe the bruises, maybe the stubborn rise and fall of her breathing, anchored him to her side. Even if neither of them knew yet that this was the moment everything would change. What do you do when the person you fear most finally learns where you're hiding? That question became a shadow in Jack's small stone cabin as Clara slowly woke from her fever, weak and trembling but alive. When her eyes opened, the first thing she saw was a man cleaning a rifle with steady, quiet hands. He didn't look at her, and she didn't dare move. Fear wrapped around her like cold wire. She tried to sit up, but her ankle throbbed, and dizziness hit her so hard she fell back against the pillow. The blanket tangled around her legs. She looked down and froze. She wasn't wearing her dress. She was wearing a man's red flannel shirt, long enough to cover her knees. Her breath hitched. The man stopped his work. He didn't turn. He didn't speak. But she felt the weight of him. Heavy. Dangerous. Unknown. Her voice came out in a dry whisper. Where is my dress? Quote. Jack stood, slow as a bear rising. He didn't move close. He just picked up a cup from the stove and walked to her bedside. Holding it out, his eyes focused somewhere over her head. Drink, he said, or you'll die. She hesitated, flinching as if expecting him to strike. The man didn't reach for her. He kept the cup steady, patient. At last, she took it with shaking hands. The lukewarm water felt like heaven sliding down her throat. He stepped back the second her fingers brushed his. The dress was ruined, he said. Had to cut it off. You were burning up. The memory hit her, running, falling, the snake, his face blurred in the fever. She looked at him now, really looked. One side of his face was strong, rugged. The other was twisted by a deep old scar that pulled his mouth into a half sneer. He looked like a man who had survived violence and learned to expect more. Are you? Her voice shook. Are you one of his men? Jack snorted. I ain't one of nobody's men. He told her she had been running. He told her the scars on her back explained more than her words. She tried to explain her past, but the words tangled in her throat. I was a wife, she whispered. Worse, he muttered. No wonder you ran. Days passed, slow and heavy. Jack left each morning, returning with rabbits or quail. Clara healed bit by bit. She walked with a limp. She cooked stew. She stitched curtains. She swept the packed dirt floor. And Jack watched her, and she watched him. They circled each other like two animals unsure if the other meant comfort or harm. At night, when coyotes howled outside the thin cabin walls, Clara lay awake, shaking. The storm hit on the third week, a violent rage of thunder and lightning that shook the roof. When lightning exploded close by, Clara screamed, raw and terrified, and collapsed to the floor, covering her head with both hands. Jack got to her fast. It's the storm, he said, grabbing her wrists to stop her from hurting herself. Clara, look at me. She fought him at first, trapped in memories of closets and punishments. He shook her once, not to hurt her but to pull her back. Clara, he snapped. It's me. Quote. Her eyes finally focused. Tears ran down her face, fear broke into sobs so deep they pulled her whole body with them. She slumped against him. She didn't plan to. Her body simply gave out and landed in his arms. Jack stiffened. He hadn't held another human being in years. He didn't know how. But something inside him cracked open. His arms wrapped around her slowly. Awkward. Unsure, but strong. One hand went to her back, the other into her hair. He held her on the cabin floor until the storm passed, until her breathing quieted, until her tears dried. That night changed everything. They didn't speak about it, but something between them shifted. Clara stopped flinching every time he moved. Jack stopped pretending he didn't listen for her footsteps. And then came the day she stood in his doorway, wearing his blue chambray shirt, and asked for her dress. He showed her the ruined scraps. She looked at the torn white cotton, the mud, the blood, the lace that once trapped her chest like a cage, and something in her hardened. "It was ruined before you cut it," she whispered. Jack stared at her, seeing more strength in her eyes than he had ever expected. He gave her clean clothes, old, worn clothes of his own. She washed them, swept the cabin, mended his shirts, cooked real stew with herbs she found. She even tried to chop wood, though she almost took her own foot off, before Jack barked at her and grabbed the axe away. Still, the next day, he left a smaller hatchet for her. He didn't say a word. The space between them became soft, warm, familiar. But safety in the West never lasted long. Jack rode to town for supplies one morning. Clara felt fear claw at her the second he disappeared into the horizon. When he returned that night, he wasn't the quiet man she had grown used to. He was angry, cold, burning, wounded in a way she couldn't see. He threw the flower on the porch, pushed past her, didn't speak. "Jack," she whispered, "what happened?" He turned, his scar darker in the lamplight. "When were you going to tell me?" he asked. Her heart stopped. "Tell you what?" "That you're a runaway wife," he said, "with a bounty on your head." Quote. Clara's knees buckled. She gripped the edge of the table. "No," she whispered. "No, it's not true. I stole nothing. I just ran." He stepped closer, fury and confusion twisting inside him. "Then why's he saying you're a thief? Why's he paying for you to be found?" Clara sank to the floor, covering her face with her hands. "Because he can't let me go," she sobbed. "Because if I'm a criminal, then he's a righteous man. If I'm innocent, then he's a monster." Jack stared at her, small, broken, terrified, and the anger leaked out of him like water from a cracked bucket. He knelt, not close, but near enough that she could hear the truth in his voice. "He ain't found you," he said quietly. "He will," she whispered. "He'll kill you for helping me." Jack held her gaze. "Let him try." For the first time in her life, Clara felt what it meant to have someone stand between her and the darkness. That night, when she begged him not to sleep on the floor, when she whispered she was scared and didn't want to be alone, Jack crossed the room and lay beside her. Just inches apart. Not touching, sharing breath, sharing warmth, sharing a silence that felt like a promise. But silence wasn't enough. Not anymore. Her hand shook as she reached out in the dark and let her fingertips brush the back of his hand. A single, trembling touch. Jack didn't pull away. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Let me remember what a gentle hand feels like." He turned toward her, his scarred face shadowed, his eyes soft for the first time she'd seen. He didn't kiss her mouth. He bent down slowly, carefully, and pressed one reverent kiss to her neck. A kiss meant to heal, not to claim. She trembled. She breathed in sharply. Her fingers slid into his, and the thread between them tightened into something real, something dangerous, something beautiful, something worth fighting for. And Preacher Hale was already on his way. What happens when the past you escaped finally arrives at your door with a gun in his hand? That answer came at dawn, carried on a voice Clara had prayed she would never hear again. 3 riders stood on the ridge above Jack's cabin, and the voice that echoed through the canyon was cold, heavy, and full of judgment. "The wicked woman shall be brought low." Clara froze. Jack's entire body turned to stone. Preacher Hale had found them. Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed his rifle, kicked open the door, and stepped out onto the porch, placing himself between Clara and the men on the ridge. "That's far enough, preacher," Jack roared. Hale lifted his chin, his face pale with holy fury. "I have come for what is mine." "She ain't yours," Jack shot back. "She's free." The preacher laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "A harlot is never free." Before Jack could answer, one of Hale's hired men fired. The bullet slammed into the doorframe beside Jack's head, splintering wood across his cheek. In less than a heartbeat, Jack dove behind the corral wall and returned fire. His shot tore through the first gunman's chest. The man toppled off his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Clara screamed his name, "Jack!" But he was already moving, already fighting. The second gunman fired wildly, missing everything. Jack hit his shoulder with a clean shot, sending the man's rifle spinning out of his hands and the horse bolting. Then only Preacher Hale remained. His face twisted in shock as he realized the men he brought to do his holy work were gone. He jerked his horse forward, charging down the slope toward the cabin, toward Clara. Jack yelled, "Clara, move!" But she didn't. She stepped out from the doorway, her bare feet planted in the red dust, Jack's blue shirt hanging off her small frame, her eyes blazing with a courage she never knew she had. She faced the man who had crushed her spirit for years. He yanked his horse to a stop, the animal rearing. His hand hovered over his revolver. "Harlot," he hissed, "look at you, filthy, standing with a killer against your own husband." "He is not my husband," Clara said, her voice steady, clear, brave. "I am your master in the eyes of God." "I would rather be a stain on the rocks," Clara said, stepping closer, "than belong to you." That broke him. Hale swung the revolver up, not to shoot, but to smash it across her skull. Jack fired first. The bullet ripped into Hale's shoulder, spinning him off his horse. He hit the ground screaming, his gun flying from his hand. He wasn't dead. Not yet. But he was defeated. Jack didn't even look at him. He ran straight to Clara, pulling her into his arms. "We go, now." There was no time to grab anything but the saddlebags already packed for danger. They rode hard, north, away from the canyon, away from the preacher's revenge, away from everything that once held Clara captive. But escape in the west always had a price. On the third day, Jack's movements began to slow. His breaths grew shallow. Clara looked down, and her heart dropped. His shirt was soaked with blood near his ribs. "Jack, you're shot." "That second one," he muttered through gritted teeth, "bullet grazed me. You'll die if we don't stop." Quote, "If we stop, they catch us." But eventually Jack's body couldn't take more. By dusk he swayed in the saddle, barely conscious. Clara tied his wrist to the horn so he wouldn't fall. She led both horses in rain so cold it felt like needles. Coyotes circled them at night. Fear circled them in the mornings. But Clara didn't give up. On the fourth day, through the haze of exhaustion, she saw a smoke trail, a town, salvation, a single sign swinging in the wind. The Silver Lode Inn. Clara half-dragged Jack off the horse, his body limp, burning with fever. The widow who owned the inn took one look at them and understood. "Room 2, she said firmly. "Doctor's on the way." No questions, no judgment, just mercy. For 4 days and nights, Clara didn't sleep. She fed Jack broth, washed his wounds, held his hand as he burned with fever. "Jack," she whispered each time he drifted. "Please, stay." On the 5th morning, his good eye opened. "Clara," he rasped. She broke into silent tears. He lived. Weeks passed. Jack healed. Clara worked in the inn. She bought fabric with her own earned coins and sewed her first real dress, a deep blue calico dress with small yellow flowers, a dress for a woman building a new life. A circuit lawyer arrived in town. Clara gave him her journal, the one she had written in the cabin, her truth. She told him her story, every scar, every fear. "My name is Clara Carver," she said with a steady voice. "Please send this east. I want the world to know." And then came the last test. A sheriff from Penance rode into town with a bounty paper. "We're looking for a runaway wife," he said, eyeing Clara. "Clara Hale." The entire inn went silent. Clara stepped forward before Jack could move. "My name was Clara Hale," she said, "and I ran to save my life." She told the truth in front of everyone. Jack stood beside her. The townsfolk stood behind her. After a long moment, Sheriff Brody looked down at the bounty and tore it into pieces. "There's no crime in surviving," he said quietly. That night, Clara put on her new dress. Jack met her outside under the cold stars, his sides still tender but his eyes warm. He touched the fabric on her shoulder, then the soft skin of her neck. "You look like yourself," he murmured. "You set me free," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "You did that yourself," he said. "All I did was pull it down." Quote, the next morning they rode out together, north toward Wyoming. 2 horses, 2 survivors, 1 future. As they passed the edge of town, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, soft and clean, erasing the past behind them. They didn't look back. They didn't need to. They were finally free.